Okay, welcome everybody to the Docs Working Group. We're happy to have you here. We have a guest with us, Carrie Crow from the Good Docs Project. Yay! Welcome. And today we're going to talk about issue templates. You want to give us a brief introduction, Carrie? Oh no!
Yes. Hi.
Oh,
my
go
name's
ahead.
Carrie. I do.
You're good now. Your video was cutting out for a moment, but you're back.
I have a history in marketing and copywriting. That's where my career has been, and I'm hoping to transition to full-time technical writer. I find that I'm much more interested in tech, and that sounds like something I'll be more comfortable with doing. And I found the Good Docs project from Elisa. I attended the Salt Docs Jam, which was awesome, by the way. It was fantastic. And from there, Elisa brought me on board to Good Docs. And I've been writing a lot of templates and blogs and white papers for Good Docs, and happy to share that with you today.
Let me give a little bit of context about Good Docs. Is that all right? Just because if somebody coming from SALT is watching this video, they might not have a context for that. So FYI, I am Elisa. I'm a technical writer for usually work primarily on SALT Stack config. So a lot of what I do bumps into OpenSalt because OpenSalt and Salt Stack config are joined at the hip. And so anyway, that's my background for Salt. But on the side, in the after hours, I like to contribute to an open source project called the Good Docs Project. And one of our core missions is to create documentation templates that can be used in open source documentation. And Carrie, as a participant in our group, has been diligently working for the last couple of months on an issue template. And Sage, because she has a pretty strong background in issue templates and making issues effective so that they can be triaged effectively. I wanted Carrie and Sage to meet to collaborate on this template together. So we're kind of doing a joint meetup today. It's kind of fun. So.
Yeah, it's way fun. So I can share this if that is easiest, and we could start with the bug template, or do you want to start with the guide, or where do you guys want to start? You tell me.
So do you want to tell us a little bit about your template, Carrie, and what your process you used when authoring it, and what the two different documents are and how they relate to each other?
Yes, whenever I was a issue template, I wanted to make sure that I had all the proper components of what makes a good issue template. And so what I did was I did look to GitHub. I looked at the most contributed open source projects. I looked at TensorFlow and Kubernetes and Facebook, and I kind of got an idea of all those templates, and they all had very similar components, and they all seem to be very effective. So I included those each component in mine, so I felt like I gave a walk along examples, what to include and what not to include, and what to make more concise when writing out a template, because it could be really you could really want to report a bug and just give a whole full-on essay of what happened. But I found that it's much easier, much more concise and straightforward, and helpful to the developers if you are just much more simple in your in writing it out. So what I can do is I can pull up I think it'd be best to talk through the user guide. And so then first,
Sure.
And then we just see the template itself after that. And I can get that for you.
Sure.
And if you don't mind, I'm sorry, I'm having some trouble hearing right now. And pop back in just a minute.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Okay, I'm sorry. Sorry to delay, but I have to reset.
No problem.
Thank you.
No worries. While Carrie's out, one thing, I have a few things I need to talk to about this template that are specific to our project, but I'll save those for later in the day when we have our community docs working group, which is where we work on these types of templates and stuff like that. But one of the things that is interesting about the relationship between Carrie's bug issue template and the about guide, it's a little different from how our project normally works. But it's good different. One of the things is that we usually have like a guide that explains how to fill in a template, and it's intended for the person writing the documentation. And so this is kind of a weird scenario where the person writing the documentation and filling out the template is a project contributor who might not normally be somebody who contributes to the documentation, but it's still important to be able to write an effective issue template anyway. And so the way Carrie's guide works is that she's got a guide for how to fill in the issue template. One of the pieces of feedback I'll give her when she comes back, which is that I would like to see some sort of link between the two documents, like on the actual issue template. It'd be nice to have the link to wherever this other guide lives to say, hey, is this your first time filling in an issue? Well, read our issue writing template or our guide first or something like that, you know?
Yeah.
So that was a thought I had, but yeah. So yeah.
Hopefully she's able to join again.
Yeah.
It really stinks when you have technical problems. I know all about that.
It's true.
It does. Yeah, I think that this is interesting. And I something else I wanted to just walk through, and we can talk about it more when she's here too, is that if you're using GitHub or if you're using GitLab, where these things kind of live and how they're accessed, kind of like what you're talking about, Elisa, is also something to just sort of think about, because it's different for every project, but they live in different places depending on where you're sort of hosting them, and then how you expect people to use them.
Exactly. So it's like we need an implementation guide, like something that says, okay, here's where it lives in GitHub or GitLab. Like here's how you open up a pull request and create this template inside of your repository. Here's how a user selects it, that kind of a thing. So you need to kind of have that sort of information. I agree.
Right, or maybe even link to it. Like if you're using GitHub, and in this context where you're using it for documentation and issue templates, they have a whole guide, so you can just link to it. And then you don't need to have that in your docs. You know, we've talked about that. Like we don't need to write everything down that's about something I can just link to that's going to be updated. And so their documentation is actually really good. GitLab's is kind of too verbose, I think, and it doesn't always tell you all the things that you need to know. So sometimes you may want it'd be a little different than if you were whatever platform you're using. And so, and then how that's going to look, like this guide may be something that's totally separate and where that wants to live, on how to fill it out and how to use it. Whereas like a code repository, like what we have for SALT, we do kind of say a little bit about the issue template and like how to fill it out, whether it's the issue template or the bug template or a PR template. But we actually expect the template itself to kind of be its guide. And that's just how we wrote it. But that's not the only way. We could see that being other ways too. That you maybe if you're a first-time contributor, you'd want to have it in that contributing guide of like, do you want to know more information because this is your first time filling it out? Yeah, absolutely. And
yeah, so I think that's helpful to like know that there's different ways to approach it, you know. Like you could have the template itself provide the information about how to fill it out, or you could have this more verbose guide that gives see like have you had a chance to read through Carrie's about? So it kind of gets, it's really nice, like the good, the bad, and the ugly, how it gives lots of examples. That's really helpful for a first-time issue writer. But if you were to put it all into one issue template, that'd be a really big issue template, and the people who are experienced with it wouldn't need that. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Hey, Carrie, you're back! Yay!
Welcome.
I apologize about that. Sorry, I just couldn't hear.
No, it's okay.
I was able to come out to my computer now and get.
That's okay. We were having lots of good discussions about issue templates while you were out.
Oh no, I missed it.
No, it's all good.
It's recorded.
Yes, it is recorded.
We'll go over it again.
Yeah, Sage, why don't you recap what you've just been talking about? You had some really good insights there.
Yeah, so I think this is really good. Something that it kind of depends on how the template's going to be used, and then sort of that life cycle of the template too. I think that the guide is really good because it the way that your project is to say this is how you implement this template, right? So you do need a guide, and then I think it's also really good to have a guide that's for your first time user. That is going to really explain that. It's not something we've done necessarily in a separate guide. We probably should, but we expect them to use the template as the guide. And that has some fallbacks to it. I don't know that or fallout.
Drawbacks. You meant to say
Drawbacks.
drawbacks. Yeah.
That's what I meant. I was like, wait, that's not the right word. What do I want? Thank you.
It's tracking with you.
I know, right? Yeah. So I think that it would be better to also have something like that that kind of gives you that more in depth, but you do probably want to consider where that's going to live its life. So if it's GitHub, GitHub actually has some really good documentation on, so if you're going to use an issue template and you want to use the config YAML file too to pick which issue template, they have a whole guide that you can just link to, which is nice. And then GitLabs isn't quite as, I wouldn't just link to it because it's kind of too verbose. I would probably just put that detail in like you've done in your guide.
So to summarize, what I think you're saying is like, so you've got, Carrie, a guide for how to fill out the issue template as though I'm a person reporting an issue, which is really, really valuable. And I really like how you've implemented it. And like to just connect with what Sage is saying, in the SALT project, we just have that how to fill it out stuff in the template itself. And the drawback is it's not quite as helpful as it could be. Like maybe a first time person reporting an issue might want your more verbose guide. So so it might be helpful to talk about like the different strategies. Like you could do this more succinct because you don't want that super huge verbose one in the template itself, because then people who are used to using the template are going to be like, that's annoying. I don't need that, you know, that kind of a thing. So you could do this like succinct one for the template, but still offer some guidance about how to fill it out there. And then link out to this more verbose guide that helps with first time contributors. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's very valuable. Even in my template, just not the user guide, just the template, I'll have like maybe like one line sentences under each, like a title, just like it's a very much smaller than the full on user guide. So if someone is like in between that, they still have some kind of guidance, some kind of structure, but they're like, I'm not telling them things they don't already know. I'm just kind of like giving them small reminders of what goes there, instead of like, hey, if you want to read my full on guide, you can go here, you know. I think it's good to touch on that, like, you know, not so like intermediate, like not so advanced level, but somewhere in between that and beginner.
Exactly.
I can either share my screen or give a another doc link out, and really what the other doc link out is my user guide, but I kind of it's the same content, but I switched the formatting a bit. Like I added some like emojis and some things to make it more like user friendly and more how it would be presented, I would think, on a page. Sure. So I can do that. I'll send it out there too.
That'd be awesome.
Okay, let me get the link sent.
One other thing I wanted to, that Sage was getting at, that I wanted to just make sure that it is clear is, and we talked about this while you were off, which is that in addition to having the how to fit the verbose user guide for how to fill out the issue template, it does help to have the person who's like the project owner like have some sort of implementation guide, like here's how it goes in GitHub, here's how it goes in GitLab, something like that could be helpful too. So.
Yeah, definitely. Like this is the way that, like, you know, if people have their own, software projects have their own like bug tracker, and so you could like link out to like, here's how they do it here. Here's a simplified way of doing it here. Yeah, I totally get the value of that. I'll just put the link in the chat here. That seems like the best thing to do.
Oh, can I add something?
Go for it.
Yeah, I guess how does all this relate to when you make a pull request? Because I like, you do the pull request and the will drop down. Oh, it's this documentation. Oh, here's this section. Oh, right. You know, a sentence about what this does, and there's like a little, you know, common code block, and then this either resolves issue something or relates to issue something. That's like very, very, very bare bones. And I don't know how it works if there's one for, bug report currently, because I'm just working on the user guide and I got on the main code. So would this be like, is there like a separate channel for submitting bug reports, or would that live in an issue? Or because I'm
Yeah,
thinking about
so-
where it fits in the workflow.
Yeah, so it depends a little bit on if you're in GitLab, like where the user guide is that we're working on, or if you're in GitHub. So I haven't put too many issue templates into GitLab, especially for that brand new user guide repo. But we have some that are in GitHub, and in GitHub, they have a config YAML file that also gives you a picker, so that if you're looking at the GUI in GitHub and you say, oh, open a new issue button, it also gives you a bunch of buttons to say, well, what issue are you opening? But if you just open a pull request, it pulls in immediately that pull request template that we have already. And then that's what we've also implemented in GitLab, is that it just has a template that's built in. So there's only one. So there's kind of a couple of different ways to do that.
Okay, I think I'm just want to go like the GitLab, 'cause
Right.
I like that, because
Yeah, it
document
uses
it's
the
gonna be a whole different
same.
sets of things. Yeah.
Yeah, it
Mhm.
uses the same kind of process that you would. It's just for issues as opposed to pull requests. So yeah.
Okay.
Right. So originally in GitHub, which was pre-GitLab, issues were one thing. So you either had an issue and it was a tab that was more like commentary, here I'm reporting a bug or I'm reporting a feature request, or you had an issue that was a pull request, and they were considered the same thing, and they were called
I see.
issues at the, at the URL level. That's what it was called. And so then they realized that there was, some other things that we should make that not just an issue, that a pull request should be really different. And so then that URL changed, and there were some different things that went that with that. And you also had the two different, like, here's an issue and then here's a pull request, because you could have multiple, linkings.
Okay.
And so that's kind of how that's changed and evolved. A lot of projects do require an issue and a pull request, that those two things need to go together. We don't. Some projects don't. Kind of depends on how the flow works.
Okay, well that makes sense, because the pull request isn't necessarily going to have issue, how to reproduce kind of thing. So
Mhm.
okay, that's my random question.
Yep. It's just for different functions within the project, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I already said this in the comments, Carrie, but I really love this second emoji guide for the how to fill out the issue template. It's just really fun and readable. I really like it a lot. So
Thank you. Yeah, that's I feel like I was able to, get my point across with the use of emojis. And then also, like, in my other one that I linked to you, I had, like, instead of like just broke it down, I had my example and I said why each one was bad or good. I had like a paragraphs of why they're bad or good, and I was like, that doesn't feel very concise myself. Doesn't feel very effective. So that's why I also wanted to use the red markings or the green check marks to show the highlights of what's bad or good, and so that would help someone be more clear to the user, instead of them scrolling to see why it's bad or good, or in this big wall of text for them. Yeah, so thanks. I like this much better too.
and the good news is GitHub does allow you to use emojis. You have to know the codes, but does GitLab allow you to use emojis in their markdown too? That's cool. Nice. So emojis are cool. They just add some
Make it more
readability.
fun.
Yeah.
Okay, actually, I can't see that.
Mhm.
I need permission. Yeah.
Or do you want to just share your screen? Either way.
Yeah, I
Well,
can share
Okay,
screen.
do that quickly, sure.
Very cool.
Yeah, I like it. I like it a lot.
Yeah, so I have an intro here that kind of shows what the Good Docs project is aiming to do, and that's to help open source projects become more effective, and then helping their quality documentation, creating templates and guides and blog posts, or numerous aspects of writing good documentation, so people can take that for their own personal projects and use those. And then I go on to talk about, why a bug report is important and what it demonstrates, and that it supplies, valuable information to find a solution for developers. And again, I mentioned this here that, you probably would be tempted to write like a really long paragraph or lengthy wall of text talking about your bug, but really I found that it's more simple and better to make it more concise. The more straightforward and condensed, the better. And then I kind of introduced how I'm going to break this down to 8 key fields, and so I list them here. And it's title, environment, steps to reproduce, expected result, actual result, visual proof, and priority and severity. And so here you'll see I'll start with the title and what makes a good title, and I'll provide examples of. I had another good doctor contributor help me out with this. They said, I think it's better for you to start with the worst example first instead of the best, because the best will then be the last thing that the user reads, and they'll be the last thing on their mind to help them remember. So I thought that was pretty good advice. So a title should be short and specific description of the issue. And I even noted that it's likely you'll want to return to the section after you complete the full bug report, just because, after you fill it out, you'll get even a more like enlightened idea about what exactly you're trying to say. And so maybe your title should change a little bit, and that's totally okay. And so my example of the ugly is, the app keeps closing. Why? I've used this app several times and this never happened before. Rambling on. I don't know why this happened. Please fix it. It's like demanding, help me now. And I write that in the red marking. That's a bad example of it's vague, and also it's emotionally driven, and unnecessarily wordy. So this is all marks to a bad example of a title. Instead, you want your title, and I'll skip over to the good, but instead you'll want your title straightforward and concise, focusing on the actual technical issue, and it helps developers locate and understand the issue. And in the good example, it says returning to app after being backgrounded causes app to crash with the error 5412. So basically, developers know exactly where to start, and that's the error code that you provided them, and it's very straightforward. I gave some good notes for the bad, because even though it's bad, there's still something to it. It said application crashes when loaded, so it's still vague, but it's an objective perspective and it's not too wordy. So it's getting there, but it's not quite to where we want it to be. And so I take this format throughout the most of my doc here, and give the same thing for environment and steps to reproduce.
Let's talk about the title for just a minute, just to give you a little bit of another thing.
Mm-hmm.
So when I've worked on a couple of different projects that get really prescriptive with their title. And so they want really specific things in there. So they want to know right off the bat, even in the title, that it's a bug. And with your issue template in GitHub and in GitLab, you can force this so that it's part of your template in the YAML config, so that it'll do like brackets and bug, or brackets and feature, or whatever you want that to say. Another project that I work on, not SALT, but something else, was also like, well, where is this in what app? So they want to know exactly where it is. So what functional area, and they require that and force that in their template. Or
that's a good point, because otherwise you won't know, like, if it's just a feature request or a bug or something that needs to be triaged.
Yeah. And so sometimes they get really, really prescriptive, but that's also really helpful, because it goes in line with exactly what you're talking about. I need to know exactly where it is. I need to know what you saw exactly. And you're already kind of giving that in that title. And that makes it a better title too. So sometimes you can also like force those things. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of nice.
Yeah, that's excellent advice. I foregone the summary, the title, because I feel like it should be like in the title with a short description there. But I think adding like what you said, that whether a feature or where you're coming from, or even the person submitting it, would be very helpful.
Would like a something
ahead,
in the
Jim.
title help with like flagging those and searching like for all the bugs, or would that be
Yes.
like a tag somewhere else?
So in both GitHub and GitLab, they do syntax searches that are fairly complex that they can either be, it's like does it have this or does it not have this, if then or that. And it'll take that syntax into your search criteria. And so then you can search on that. It'll also do it, via a label. You can force that on a template as well. But having some key wording on functional area is difficult to put into a template, but to ask for and to say, like, then they can fill it out, and that helps you as well. And then, yeah, you can search on that syntax. Like error codes would be a good one. That's probably something that's common throughout. For us, we have a lot of functional areas within SALT. And so we'd want to know, is this like a module? Is this one of our 526 modules that we're talking about? Or are we talking about like the state system? Are we talking about an engine? Are we talking about an API? What exactly are we talking about there?
Good stuff. One advantage I thought of having this, like how to fill out an issue guide, is if somebody is triaging an issue and the issue was poorly written and didn't have enough information in it to take action on. One nice thing is you could go back and say, hey, I didn't get enough information from this. Here's what I need from you. And for reference, here's this guide. Please read this. This teaches you how to fill out an issue for our project. So that's another, I think, point in favor of having a guide like yours, Carrie.
Absolutely. So in GitHub, you can have some saved replies, and I would probably save a reply that linked exactly to some of these portions, or maybe just the guide in general, and then to pull out some of those pieces like, hey, you're missing this piece. And if we did something like that, you can even write a script that would go and do that for you. Hey, you didn't fill this out. Thank you for contributing, but we actually need this. And it would grab it because you have a template and do it for you. Automation all the way.
While we've got you here, Sage, one of the big things that I thought would be helpful for Carrie to talk to you about would be the part where we've got the severity and the priority. In Carrie's template, she's having them assign a severity and priority, and that is a choice that you can allow, of course. But that's also probably an optional thing that some projects might opt to say, no, we will assign that priority or severity during the triage process. And also, like, I think a dependency for this doc, which would maybe go into the implementation guide, would be you need to, as a project, define what your priorities and severities are. And that's like a prerequisite before even putting this issue template out there, because you need to figure that out as a project. But and I thought you would have some really good insights to offer about the priority and severity stuff, Sage.
Yeah, so we don't do this on this project where we let them pick or even tell us. We have really succinct priority and severity that we assign, but I think that it's also something we may be missing to even ask them, what do you think this is? And give that criteria. So I like to do a minimum amount, and when I first came onto the project was both a priority and a severity. And priority was how many users are affected. And severity was like, does it crash? Does the app crash? Or does it have a workaround? Or is this cosmetic and it's misspelling? And it was sort of those things, but they were not industry standard. So it was really, really subjective on what those words meant. And then how they were actually defined that didn't match up with how people thought of them as sort of industry standard. So we aligned those to be more industry standard. And instead of having 4 priority and 4 severity, which made, a matrix of 16 at any given issue, and not knowing what that meant, some sort of large matrix schema, you didn't know what priority that meant for you as an individual developer. I said, let's combine that, and we're going to just do severity and priority together, and we're going to have 4, because 4 you can keep in your head. And so then we clearly defined what those were, and where our breakdown is that it comes with, if there is a workaround, then that hits a medium severity. So we have critical, high, medium, and low. And if it's critical, then that means nothing is happening. So you're probably not going to have a ton of those. And then high would be there's not a workaround. medium, there's a workaround, but we need to fix it. And then low would be super cosmetic. And once I started sharing that out with people too, to bring people in to help us with triage, it actually made me realize how I needed to make that very, very succinct, that they could read something super quick and like a table to be like, oh, okay, it's this, 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 so that they could organize it really quickly. And that was really helpful, I think, even for the team, not just the community, to be able to pick that out, to have just that real succinct definition of what that meant.
And if you don't mind, would you be willing to talk a little bit more about the triage process? Because the issue is like the beginning
Yeah.
of a triage process. And so like this is information provided to the team in the form of an issue, but what happens in the rest of the issue's life cycle? Where does it go, or where should it go? There's what projects could do, but there's also what we think projects should do. And I'd be
Yes.
interested in hearing your opinion on that, because I've learned so much from you about that portion of it too. So
yeah, so the life cycle of an issue kind of depends on the project and how they run it. Something that's going to come into play here is we do an agile form of our workflow, and so we really follow that more simplistic agile form. We don't really do Scrum. We kind of do Kanban, which is still an agile framework, but we're looking for something to go quick. So, and triage is meant to be fast. It's not fast on the SALT project. I wish it was fast. It's not fast, but we wish that it was. So I'm trying to work towards that. And so as we look at that life cycle, we should be able to assess from a template that's well written and then filled out what exactly is happening, and then where that fits in that severity criteria, and then when that needs to be fixed, and then thus when that issue would get closed. So as we look at that severity and we're reading, what's happening for this user and where this is going, a lot of what we're looking for is, okay, well, can they do something else? So really for the SALT project, if it's a module, you can probably do something else to get this working. There's probably another module, there's probably a state system, there's some other way that you can hit an API, you can do a CLI command. There's something else out there that you can do. So there's almost always a workaround if it involves a module. So that helps people to kind of break that down. And then as we look at that issue and we say, maybe we don't have enough information, well, then how do I get that? And then what happens to that issue while I'm trying to get that? Well, we put that into a blocked status. And so we use a milestone for that. So then I have a place to look for it. And so that goes into a spot where we can say, oh, I'm waiting on some information from the user so that then I can finish this triage process. And then the blocked issues get visited a couple of times a week. Once they come out of blocked, do they need to be re-triaged, or do I just have enough information that I'm ready to go and it can be developed? And is it severe enough that I need to have somebody looking at it right away? So then that kind of also gives you that idea of like, okay, so how serious is this and how quickly do I need to move on it? And if you don't have enough information and they haven't filled out the template, then it usually sits there some time. And that's not, nobody wants that, right? Like that's not our idea of how to get things done quickly. So as it comes out of blocked and it moves into an approved status, if it's not super severe and doesn't need to be done right away, then you're probably looking at where that's going to be released. And so we have the criteria that anything that is a critical, a high, or a regression, which is something else, right? That those are going to get fixed in the next release. And so then I have a milestone for those releases. And then anything else kind of gets planned as the year goes. And then anything that's actually a medium severity, we've recently kind of come out and said, hey, we're really looking for the community to jump on the medium severity sort of throughout. We'll try to get to a few of those, sort of a percentage-ish each release cycle, but we're really looking for community and not the core team to do those, because that's, the core team's only like 9 developers and the community's thousands. So we're like, hey, help us. We need your help, community. That's what open source does. And then we're also looking for, in both GitHub and GitLab, you can link an issue with your PR. And so as that PR references that is linked, once that gets merged, it closes that issue for you. So you're not also like, oh, do I need to go and review this manually? Because that's also helping you with that lifecycle process to make sure that those are closed. Something that we don't do a great job of, because of the way that issues have been written in the past, is we like to write these gigantic issues that are huge, 1 million different, other issues that probably link to them. And also PR, I've been trying to break it down into much, much smaller pieces of work. So one issue PR, and that's how that should function. We're not quite there where we can say that that's a totally hard and fast rule, but we're getting there. And that makes it also a lot easier to have that issue flow and that life cycle just continue, and that everybody knows what it is.
Okay, that's been working well in the user guide, because I have these
Good.
little issues, and okay, this file's done. You put it under closes rather than relates. And
Mhm. Yep. And I really like the way GitLab uses the scoped labels, so that as you change a label, it also will take off the other label. So if you have a set of labels that are called scoped and they're written a certain way, then it can only ever have one of those labels. So to do that for like to do, doing, done, as soon as you change it, it takes off its label and then moves it on your storyboard too. So then it's easier, more automatic. Yay.
So I wonder if a recommendation could be that. So I like your idea of combining priority and severity together. I think that's a pretty good suggestion. And then having a clear definition of what counts as one or the other. And then it might be interesting to let people submitting an issue define that, as long as, of course, the team doing the triage afterwards can say, no, we don't agree. It's
Yep.
this priority or this something
Mhm.
like that. So yeah.
Yeah, and to probably give that in the templates and in your guide really succinctly, and if that's ever updated, to make sure that it's clear and people agree with what that means exactly. So to be able to pick quickly, so if you've ever worked in healthcare, I did very briefly, they have really clear triage that happens when you come into like the ER, right? Like if you're bleeding, if you can't breathe, or you've like severed a limb, right? Those are kind of that's like trauma. You're here. We're not even gonna take your name. We're just gonna get you in a bed and we're gonna fix you, right? We're gonna start working on you right away. If you just need stitches or if you have a broken limb, that's a little less, severe. And so they have some really strict criteria. So laying that all out and then making it visible in all the places where people are gonna see it and that people really understand what that means. So like for us that we have, if it has a workaround, that really drops it down to that medium severity level, that really helps people to understand, oh, okay, well then I know where that fits in this 4 criteria. Because 6 criteria you'll get everything piled into sort of 1 or 2 places that maybe that definition's not as clear, because you've also got 6, and what does that mean? People usually do better with 3. I actually like 3, but I couldn't get them to do 3 after 16, but we got to 4. So I'm gonna just take that as a success.
I have a question about kind of generic versus specifics. The the good docs, sort of the goals have, okay, here's something you can just pull off the shelf or something you can use. But then, things like priority and severity, you can define things, but it seems like every project will have their own definitions. And
Yeah,
maybe it may be
there's some
different
industry
definitions within
standards.
one group.
Mhm.
Is expected you're gonna have to hack on it locally, or
Yeah, there's some, so depending on kind of where you are within technology, are you doing hardware? Are you doing software? Are you doing app? Are you doing security? Are you doing DevOps? There's some industry standards when you start getting into that about severity and priority. And then a lot of what we kind of have come from is that Itil model. So your Itil model was really like, so how does IT interface with its customers? And it is a library that is totally dedicated to like, how do I tell you and how do I talk to you and how do I commit to my customer what it is that I'm doing in IT? Not only have you submitted some sort of like, I need help or I need to do something or there's a bug, we're talking like broad scale IT, that we're also saying we're going to communicate back with you. And so they have some standards that you can draw upon. And so clearly laying that out and saying this is more industry standard, or we've gone with this standard. We've gone with like, so electrical engineering has all these kinds of standards, and you could pull from that if that's what fits for your project. Just state it. I don't know that it matters exactly what you hit on that's a standard. Do what fits for your project. Just be explicit and communicate it out.
One of the things that I think would be possibly helpful would be because the magic of templates, like just putting in a plug for good docs in general, the magic of templates is getting you started and giving you a starting place so that you can then, revise and iterate and make it whatever you want it to be. And in that spirit, what I think would be good would be to offer a first suggestion in the template. Like, here's what
Yes.
we recommend for your priority levels. Here's the standard it's based on. And you can then throw that out and use your own system, but at least you've thought about it and considered what you want to do. With that in mind, is there a standard you recommend or?
So yeah, that's a good question. I would actually need to go and research that a little bit because I haven't looked at it in a while. But I can tell you that there's like the Itil standard that has some, probably way too much. I think it has 6 for each, priority and severity, but you can kind of pull that out into 3. And so you could also link out in this guide to some of those standards. I'd actually be interested to see what other projects are using, some other open source projects that are probably similar to, like, someone who's doing like Kubernetes probably has something really different than like Salt has, as well as someone who's probably doing app development that's like native app development for Mac or native app development for Windows or something like that. They're going to have their own standards. And it'd be interesting to link to some of those things as well, whatever they're doing, or what they talk about. Because usually what I see in open source software projects is they just say, well, it's a standard. And I'm like, but what standard are we talking about? And so you have to kind of read throughout their documentation to figure out what their standard is. But they do usually eventually link to it. And so you can go find it. Electrical engineering has a lot that parodies what happens in sort of software and computer science. And so we tend to use that, even though there's absolutely no standard for computer science.
Yeah, thank you, Sage. I think that's great to link out to standards. When I was writing about priority and severity, I even said in my template, usually based on the priority, developers can decide how soon it must be fixed, and same thing in severity. In most cases, it'll be chosen by project leads. But just because I say those things, that these people who are using the template could very well be those project leads. I want them to, if they're not, to be able to understand everything that we are. That we're talking to them about, and so they can later assess that in the future. Like, this is a learning opportunity, even if you don't need to know that right now, you have that knowledge for later to apply. And so I plan on adding a lot more context here about what high, medium, low means, or based on different projects, as Jim suggested, and also even link to like a blog post later about how to form a triage and what that means, and how that could help you how that could result in your priority severity levels, and have much more of a defined process for them, because this all could at first glance be very confusing for someone who is a beginner.
Yes, I'll even send you a couple of links just so you've got them.
Thank you.
Nice. One time in a distant past life, I got my Itil certification, but I don't know that I could tell you anything about Itil anymore. It's been so long.
Yeah, and so if you wanted to also link to something that's really generic, let me, something that's just for sort of projects in general, it would be like the PMP standard. And so this is your project management professional standards that would go across sort of any project. So you're talking about a construction project, or you're talking about, maybe an art project. What are you talking about? This should go across all of those. I'll just have to find that one. That one's going to take me a minute though.
This is good stuff. Really good feedback. Carrie, do you have any other like immediate things that you'd like feedback on while you've got Sage's ear and Jim's ear? Jim, you used to do software development, or you still do software development, I assume, or is that right?
No, not anymore. I used to do a little programming. I wouldn't call myself a developer. I never used, MRs or Git or anything.
Nice.
But I know how they think, right? It's like this is a lofty project, but seems like everything is a special case, right?
Yeah.
No, this is great.
What I really wanted to hit on was priority severity, so I'm really happy that we talked about that. But I guess looking over my template, there's some things that I was advised to add. Is there anything that, is there any key field that you think is missing here that you think would be good to add to the template itself, or that I haven't mentioned in mine?
No, I actually think this is really good. One of the things that I think you do here in the guide, when you go through like the steps to reproduce and expected results, when you give really good examples, that's actually awesome. And I think that we even have done some of what you do in your steps, where we say, you know, walk us through it. You know, I opened this, I did this, give me all the steps. I want all your little mediocre minutia steps. And that's awesome. I think that's really, really great. And then to give the expected and actual results. Sometimes it's interesting because people will just say, well, I expected it to work. And I was like, okay, you give me a little more than that. What, in what way? You know, how? Taking it very literally. And so to give them those words, it's awesome.
Yeah, like I expected it to work. Well, what did you expect to see actually on the screen? What happened?
Right.
Yeah, like yeah, I you know, also there's a section here which I don't have yet, which is the visual proof section. Well, I'll actually just provide, like, right now it's just text, which doesn't make sense for that section, but I'll actually provide screenshots and like a couple of screenshots to show that's where to that's the place to put that there. But yeah,
Something else we do that's really common with our project is that sometimes people will write a gist, and a gist is another thing in GitHub where you can kind of like write out what you're thinking in code, because a lot of what we have for sysadmins comes out in code. And so that's fine, but we'll take a Giphy. If you know how to do a little movie, that's awesome, because I can actually watch you do it. It's great if you can do that. We also have a lot of sensitive information. So we do sometimes even say in your actual results, or if you're going to give us your log files, please sanitize it. And so that may be something that you want to just put into your guide or your template, that it is okay to do that. Because there's a lot of projects that'll be like, yeah, we're trying to help you. Don't give us your passwords or anything in plain text. We certainly don't want that. You know, please feel free.
yeah, I think
sure
that's actually that's a great thing to add, because you know, like I kind of put that you know, I didn't include that because in my mind I was like, that's kind of without being said, but that's not really the case. People won't be willing to like really help and put a bunch of information out there that's really going to harm them. So I'll add that too. And just to add, the gift thing's a brilliant idea. You know, that's your steps to reproduce, but visual form. You can't get any better than that. Really, that's really good.
Yeah, something that we see a lot is that people won't give us enough information, and what it's come down to is that they don't know how to sanitize it to give it to us. And we're like, oh, that's fine. You can block it out. You can point us to what you use to start your custom configuration. That's fine. You know, just give us a little bit of information to let us help you. Because if we don't get anything and we're putting it into blocked, is that because you thought you couldn't send us your non-sanitized version? Oh no, please do that. Of course.
I definitely think I'll make a note there, because there's in one of my sections here, I did the steps to reproduce. I did include like email address and the login, and then I'll make a note about that's where you can blank it out. There's no harm in that, you know, as long as you're just showing through the process.
Something that I thought about as I was looking up severity and priority and some standards, something that I've used on a project, although it's been a while, is that we actually used colors. And this is usually more standard in project management and less so in computer science and programming, but it's always the get to green. And so getting to green would be like, oh, I want to get everything to green, so it can't be blocked, because blocked would be like red. And this kind of depends on what their, you know, severity and priority, what that means exactly. But to get to green would be like, it's not blocked, and I know that it's critical, and I know that I need to fix it soon, and that's my get to green status. Not in green would also be like, I need information, or maybe I don't know how to move forward on this to fix the bug. Because then you're not only getting something from, because oftentimes what we see in a big project with a gigantic community is we don't know how to communicate to our community that I'm actually working on something, but I don't necessarily have a pull request open. So what do I say? And how do I communicate that? And it's that gets a green status. How am I fixing this? And where is that going to get fixed?
Okay. Oh,
Plus,
may
I
I
love
add
the visual.
may I add a gentle suggestion?
Yeah.
Just in the layout, you've got like the big sans serif titles and like this very small serif titles. It's kind of hard to parse all at once. I would
Definitely
think
look
it's-
different in Markdown, which is its final format. But like the probably could use bold for the good, the bad, and the ugly with the emojis, but then use the headings for the bolder titles. Yeah.
Okay, well, is it
Yeah. Oh,
you
sorry.
said
I
it was
was-
okay to mix serif and non-serif fonts on a page? Or?
Well, in Google Docs, it probably is, but in Markdown, it would never.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
Markdown.
Yeah. This is I appreciate the feedback because it will look very different in Markdown, but I totally
Okay.
see for readability, it's yeah, I appreciate that.
You
Thank
just don't like the mix of sans serif with serif, is that right, Jim?
No, it's just the headings and the
weight, so it's the
text,
weight.
which kind of clash
Okay.
a little bit.
Yeah, no worries.
That's what I was asking. Is that
No, I was
Is
just
that
gonna
just
say like
personal
that's
taste?
no, it's a common design thing to use a sans serif or the other for the headings that you do from your body that is opposite from your body text. So
Okay.
yeah, it's all good.
That's good feedback. Thank you.
Wow.
But I don't think I have anything else, but love more questions or anything. If you want to go into anything?
Cool.
Yeah, I guess is there anything would you have when I'm writing up? I know this is separate than the this template right here, but it's going to add a lot of value to the template. And so is there anything else, any final thoughts on like what to include for a beginner to create their own triage process?
That's a good question.
Do you think that would be appropriate to go in the implementation guide for this bug template?
Yeah, that was one. Yeah.
That's actually it's a good. It kind
What
of
do
depends
you-
on how
yeah.
how you're running it. So I always would. It's not something we've done on the SALT project very well. We kind of assume that if you're looking at this is all you're looking at, and that's not really true. So it probably would be good to reference some other things. Like you may also have a feature template. You may also have a pull request template and guides on those. And you may also have like maybe not a triage guide, but maybe they have some sort of like life cycle of issues for their project that they refer to, or a contributing guide. And those are probably some other things you may would just want to mention in this guide to say, and in your project, you probably also want to link to some of these things or like this, right?
Yeah, I guess I think that's great. I was wondering how deep I need to go on the template itself for priority severity, because I feel like that's the reason why I thought that was a whole separate that could fill a document enough itself, and so I didn't want to like bombard someone with so much information in one text, and that's why we had originally suggested or thought about making a blog post about triage and how that could help you assess these, but I wasn't really sure what all to include here without an overload of information. Like I want to make sure it's simplified and but
Totally.
informative.
Yeah. I'm starting to feel like this is 3 documents. Like you've got the template itself, you've got the guide to how to fill out the template as a contributor to the project, like I'm reporting a bug. So that's that guide. But we also need an implementation guide, how to actually implement this in your project, that kind of thing. So
Yeah, I think that's
yeah, because a lot of the projects are probably going to have something, and then they're going to be like, but then how do I where do I get started with this in my project? And that's a good way to go, to even just give them that. They do a little bit of that in the guides that they have. So in GitHub, they have guides and they have documentation. And this has been a change recently, and they do a really good job of like, here's kind of a tutorial that'll walk you through it, even like a video, and it'll kind of show you, or it'll just show you the steps. And then they have like documentation that shows you deeper. And so your implementation guide on your project may be something you could link to that they already have. You know, like maybe you're just a straight up GitHub open source, you're doing everything with GitHub, and just link to that. And those are there.
Good stuff. I think we're at time.
Thank you all so
I
much.
think we are.
Very, very helpful.
Here.
Thank you, Sage, for being willing to meet with those of us from the Good Docs and
Yeah, thank
to
you.
make Carrie's excellent template even more excellent. So,
Yes.
all
Thank you
right.
guys for joining. It's been fantastic. Everybody have a happy Thursday.
See
Yeah.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.